My name is Katharina Klei. I'm one of the German instructors here at Click. And yeah, actually it's great what Miriam just presented. And I want you all to keep in mind the interactional practices that she was talking about. So she was talking about turn-taking, topic development, active listenership. That also plays a role here. You know, so you can actually combine all of these and call this interactional competence, right? So for our students to be able to communicate with others, we want them to use, you know, competencies or resources like, resources like, you know, response tokens. We want them to be able to open a conversation, close a conversation. We want them to be able to say hello properly in the target language, to say goodbye. What else falls in these categories? For example, extending invitations, but also refusing, accepting those, requests, I'm going to talk about today, compliments that Christina was talking about earlier today. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about requests. It's just one example of those interactional resources that students need in order to be able to communicate with other language users. Okay. Okay, and what I would like to do is present a set of instructional phases that you can use to actually teach those resources. Yeah? So Miriam said, okay, it's important that students know these and bring these resources to their, you know, to the conversation. Yeah? But how do students actually get those? Okay, how can we teach them? And I want to show you one example or a sample lesson that I developed for requests in German. And this is really just making requests. So no response to that quite yet, but just actually making requests. How do you do that? And I thought at the end of my presentation, you could also develop, you know, like a couple activities based on those phases I'm going to be talking about. Okay, so this is the plan. Okay, so those instructional phases, there are a couple of researchers, scholars, Betz and Hoot, who came up with those, suggested them. Again, based on another researcher's suggestion on a set of instructional phases. And here you see them. There are 5. Okay. And the first one, they say, okay, first students should actually reflect on how language in action works. Yeah, so that means we have to sensitize the students to our target, to our learning target. For example, in my case, requests. Yeah, you can have them think about requests. How do they do that? Yeah, in their native language, maybe. Yeah, we can also sensitize them to, as they say here, how language works in action. Okay, meaning, yeah, language or like communication is ordered in a specific way. Just make them aware of that there are certain rules. Yeah, even in communication, not just in grammar. So you can do that in that phase, okay? Yeah, prior to the actual lesson itself, okay? For the next step here, you see contrastive analysis of L1 and L2 structures. So what they do here is they bring in the L1, okay? So they say, okay, our students are competent, of course, are competent speakers in their first language, but they're not necessarily aware of you know, of the mechanisms of that language, right? They don't really know, they just compliment others, but don't necessarily know how that works, right? So we want to make them aware of, you know, how the structure works in their own language, and that can then, you know, be a very nice springboard for the language analysis in the second language. Yeah? All right. Yeah, so part of all of this, and this is here number 3, step number 3, or phase number 3 is analysis of L2 structures. So what they suggest is we have to work with authentic materials in the L2. So we want students to actually work with those natural interactional data, and we want to guide students, you know, give them questions, guiding questions, so that they themselves figure out how the structure works, yeah, in the L2, yeah. And then here, again, you got the contrastive analysis, L1, L2, okay? Next step is practice, and here they put, okay, we should include as many skills as possible, yeah? And here they say, okay, we should do that in writing and speaking, yeah? And maybe we should start small, yeah? From simple constructions and then get more complex, later on. Yeah, so that's the idea here. And at the end, they suggest let's discuss and reflect more on the structure we talked about. Here they point out the translingual, transcultural discussion reflection, and they mean let's bring in the L1 again. Yeah, let's again kind of summatively compare the two. Yeah, discuss the differences, similarities, and yeah, talk about what it actually means then to, you know, or what the different actually means for us, yeah, as language users, for example. So these 2 points, especially for Betz and Hoots phases or set of instructional phases, are very important. So you need natural or authentic interactional language data. That of course includes the learning target, and here the learning target, you know what I mean, right? These are the interactional practices that Miriam was talking about, yeah? Of course, you can focus only on one, okay? Yeah, not on a whole bunch of them, just one learning target, in my case, requests. And what would be ideal is to have native language data and, of course, target language data. And, of course, you also need to have some understanding how that learning target actually works, both in the native language and in the target language. Otherwise, it won't really work. And again, you can base this on your own observations or on so-called conversation analytics studies. And now you go like, oh my gosh, what is that now? Okay, conversation analysis is a research methodology that actually came out of sociology in the 60s, I believe. So it's, and you know, these people were interested in studying talk, or how talk is organized and how it works. Okay, so conversation analysts have this idea, or they know, okay, language or like communication is organized in a specific way, and we want to study that. Okay, we want to find out how this works. So they collect data, they collect language. Yeah, so they walk around. Back in the day, they did with voice recorders. Now they have video, right? So they video record people talking to each other, record that and analyze it. Okay, and they look for practices like turn taking, yeah, as Miriam was saying. They look for practices like active listenership or topic development, yeah, these kind of things, yeah, and then they write papers and publish them, and then we can use them for lessons like this one, for example. Okay, so I was lucky. I actually found some research on requests in German. Yay! Okay, actually by Hoot, the guy who actually one of the co-authors of this paper. Yeah, and so he wrote this one paper on requests. So I have some sort of an idea how requests work in German. Okay, so I learned from that paper that Germans try to avoid requests. They don't want to really request, they don't like to do that. Okay, they rather want the other one to make an offer. That's much better. Okay, so and if they actually have to, then of course, you know, go through with their request, then they're very hesitant. Okay, there are lots of pauses. Okay, like okay, everything's really long pauses, hesitations, and so on and so forth. Okay, so this is how this works in German. And of course, in that paper I found, there were also examples, yeah, of transcripts. Okay, so German dialogues and English dialogues. Okay, so they were already there. They were already there, so I didn't have to look for more, which was very nice. The only downside is I don't have the audio or the video. Okay, so I only have the transcript itself. So and so I only implemented or I only used the dialogues that I found in that paper for that lesson. Okay. So and I now want to show you that lesson. Okay. And what I have is a handout for you, and I'm going to give you that in a second. It's right here. Whoa. Yeah, okay, I'm going to give you that in a second. But I also wanted to point out that the lesson is also on CLIC's Bridging Research and Practice website. Again, it's a sample lesson plan. The target group is a second semester German class. Okay, so still first year, okay, but a second semester of the first year. Here the learning objectives. So for this lesson, students have to analyze authentic language data, so that's one of the goals here. Identify how requests are made in German, how does that work? They compare and contrast German and American English request features. I want them to become aware of linguistic and cultural similarities, but also differences. And of course, I also would like them to practice making requests in German. Okay, so that was pretty much these were the objectives. What you see now here is the lesson breakdown. So you've got Bets and Hoots faces here on the left. And then the individual steps, that's not the second column, a little description, and then what task it actually is then on the student handout. Actually, I don't want to spend too much time now on pages 1 and 2. This is just a nice little summary of the lesson itself. I'd rather want to go to the student handout to show you the actual activities, okay? So if you could just go to page 3, that would be great. Again, here you have the link to the lesson that's on the Bridging Research and Practice website. The link again. And okay. So here's the first step, the introduction. Remember, phase 1, Bets and Hoots said, well, it would be great to have students reflect on the learning target, right? Or how language actually works, okay? How language in action actually works. And what I had the students do is to, well, I mean, first off, we just talked about requests. Do you sometimes make requests? How do you do that? So I had them reflect on how they do that in their first language, okay? In that respect, I also had the students, or this is an option, okay? I didn't do that for the lesson that's on the Click website. I didn't do that, but it's just a nice little add-on you could do with your students. Is actually have them have 2 students sit together, okay? And one actually makes a request, okay, and the other one has to respond, and have a third student listen to their conversation and write it out. Write as much as the person actually can, okay? And then you compare in class and see, okay, how does this actually work in the first language? What did you guys say? How do you do that? Gather that on the board, okay? So this is the first step to look at how awareness raising in the L1, okay? Instead of just asking questions, how do you do requests in English, would be nice to actually get them try it out themselves, okay? Yeah, have them do it themselves, yeah? So this is something you could do to sensitize, to the learning target. All right. So, and then remember phase 2, yeah, in Bets and Hoots outline, or yes, set of phases. We said, okay, then now we have to compare. We want to compare and contrast L1, L2, and then phase 3 was like the analysis, right? We want to analyze language, yeah, or spoken language, authentic data, okay. And I think those two phases kind of go hand in hand, yeah. Because I mean, first, what I would do is, and what I did here too, is give students a dialogue or a transcript, right, in English, and give guiding questions, yeah, and then do the same thing for German, yeah, and then have them compare and contrast, okay. So, and this is what you see here, okay. So there's a so-called task number 1 with an English example. This is a conversation between Donnie and Marsha, and Donnie has a problem, yeah. So he starts off by saying, guess what? My car stole, and so on and so forth. I'm here in the Glen. So you can tell he would like to, he wants to ask Marsha for her car, okay? Okay, so that's what's happening here. I don't know if it's possible, and then you breathe a short pause, and so on and so forth. But Marsha doesn't really respond, right? So she doesn't really offer the car right away, okay? So he has to be persistent, but eventually she says no, yeah? But actually, Donnie doesn't even say right away, or he doesn't actually say that he wants the car, yeah? Eventually, she knows what he wants, yeah? So this is one example how it could be in English, okay? And here you see some guiding questions for the students. That's now on page 4, yeah? For example, what is Donnie asking from Marsha? Does Donnie actually articulate his request? Does he actually get there? And it turns out, no, not really, okay? What does actually Donnie do to keep this request so vague, yeah? And so on and so forth. Okay, so keeping that in mind, then we move on to the German dialogues and look how this works, okay? And again, students answer questions with respect to the linguistic and interactional functions that are used in these dialogues, and then the students analyze 2 transcripts on their own, yeah? And so the learning focus right here, so they will be on the lookout for different linguistic interactional features, okay? And I don't want to go over every single detail here, but you see on pages 4, 5, here's the dialogue, and there are questions for the students. And this type here, these kind of questions are more like, kind of like multiple choice, yeah? You give them a question or a statement, and then they say, okay, it's more like this or more like that. Okay, so they can choose, they can select from a set of responses here, and I think that's quite nice at that level for second semester. Yeah, and the German, the second German example is a little different from the first one. That's why it's on here, and students actually will figure out why. Yeah, it's a little different, and that example is here on page 6. And again, you have the guiding questions then on pages 6 and 7. Yeah. All right, you got all the translations here. Okay. So, so we worked with the L1, we worked with the L2, the students did the analysis, right? And now it's time to actually bring this all together, okay? To compare and contrast. Yeah. So what are the features of the L1? What are the features of the L2? And I think what you can do is to develop a table, create a table. I think that's always a great idea. For example, here, these are the request resources, and I actually give them to the students. And now it's their turn to say, okay, yes, that's true. We found that that's really true for German, or no, that's not true for German. Yeah. And then I want them to have a look again at the English and say, oh, is that actually also something that we do in American English? Yeah. All right. For example, maybe you remember at first I said, or at the beginning I said that for German requests, or Germans don't really want to, they try to avoid to make requests, yeah? For example, here the requester tries to avoid making an actual request, and the requester prefers if the other person offers to help, yeah? And then hopefully students have figured out by then, yeah, that's true, okay? Yeah, because it becomes very apparent in the dialogues they read or they saw. Okay, so once you're done with that, do you remember what's the next phase? We said we did the analysis of the reflection first, we did the analysis, we compare, contrast, and now we practice. Exactly, we practice. All right, what I would do first is the writing part. Okay, so have them maybe write a dialogue, and that's what I did here. So I gave students scenarios. Okay, I gave students scenarios, and they had to write out a dialogue. Yeah, so they had two dialogues here. So they did that, and of course you can have students then of course act out those dialogues in class. Yeah, that's no problem at all. I did that too, and there's also a practice in a speaking practice. Same thing. Students engage in 2 role-play activities here with a partner, and they just practice making requests. Yeah. And here are the tasks for that. Yeah. So there's a scenario 1 and a scenario 2. All right. We're almost done. Okay. We said there's a final reflection or discussion phase. And what I did here is I had students reflect on the similarities and differences between American English and German requests. And actually it turned out that there are not that many differences, okay, between the two, and the students found that, okay. Of course, linguistically there of course are differences, yeah, the way those are articulated, but yeah, in general there were not that many differences, more similarities than differences. Okay, and so what I had students do in pairs first or in small rooms, discuss these questions, kind of like a little summary, how requests are constructed in German, what are the similarities, differences, and actually how do you feel about this? Okay, how do you feel making requests in German? Is that very different from making requests in American English? Is this kind of weird, or is it no different? Yeah, okay, and then we brought this back to the whole group and discussed that some more. Okay, so that was the lesson as such. Thank you so much for your attention.